From 5G to foldable phones, what's hot at MWC Barcelona?
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.
Welcome to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm not joined this week by Adam Turner. He's in a bit of a catatonic fugue, having been informed by NBN Co that he's actually going to be getting an NBN connection any day now. Now, this week has been the big Mobile World Congress show in Barcelona. Lots of 5G news, lots of foldable phones, lots of new phones to get to. Typically speaking, most years I would actually be on the ground chasing those phones down myself. Unfortunately, this year that hasn't been the reality. So once again, I'm going to have to fire up the trusty old vertical hold satellite. And it's not looking great. It took a little bit of water on last week, crashing in between here in the States on the way back from the Samsung Galaxy event. But we'll see if we can get it fired up just to get us through the week. So while I'm not in Barcelona, a large quantity of the finest tech writers and journalists that Australia has are there. And I'm joined first by Fergus Halliday from PC World and Good Gear Guide. Fergus, can you hear me all the way from Barcelona?
I can. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat.
So it's been an interesting MWC, lots of new products released, and obviously lots of press conferences to run around as a busy tech journalist. And Oppo was kind of first off the rank on Saturday night, and they had a few interesting things to say, didn't they?
Oppo have a really interesting tradition at Mobile World Congress of focusing on sort of the technologies that power their products rather than the products that you can buy from them themselves. And although I had a secret suspicion maybe they might change that this year, that didn't end up happening. So instead, what they showed was this new triple lens periscope camera that will allow their phones to offer 10 times optical zoom without any distortion, like you would get on digital zoom. And that was really impressive, actually. So that was their thing that they brought. Their VP also put a bunch of photos up on Twitter of their prototype foldable phone, but basically cited a bunch of concerns around performance and battery life as for why they didn't bring it to show.
Yeah, their foldable phone's an interesting one because it looks an awful lot like somebody else's foldable phone, but we might get to that in a minute. That 10 times optical zoom camera, it's a heck of a technical achievement, but I can't help feeling as though I've heard this song before, because a couple of years ago they had a 5 times optical zoom camera lens that never came to a physical product.
Correct. Yes, that was the first question I had when they started talking about this 10 times zoom camera was, are you actually going to put it in a product? And the answer is yes. They've basically committed that they will release a phone in the second quarter that will have this feature that may or may not be their first 5G phone. So they seem to at least understand and have read the room. And are actually going, no, if this is real, we promise it's ready for mass production, etc. So that's promising. And it was actually quite interesting to mess with. That in the demo, they had they had these sort of little miniatures and you could zoom around and stuff like that. And I wasn't super impressed with it when I did that demo, but later I got the chance to use it actually outdoors in like well-lit environments, and like the architecture of Barcelona just like really pops. In those scenarios.
It's a very beautiful city. It's a good spot to test a camera, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am really interested to see when that comes to market and what price it will be, because like apples to apples, having the Mate 20 Pro and this Oppo prototype side by side, the Mate 20 Pro does look a bit sharper. But if Oppo are offering a product that is half the asking price or close to that's kind of a different story, really. So that was what Oppo had to show. That was what Oppo had to show, and I'm really interested to see where they go.
You mentioned 5G before, and they also sort of announced their 5G phone, and it's one that's got particular relevance to Australian consumers, given who they had up on stage to announce it.
Yes. They had Alan Liu from Optus, and then I'm forgetting who they had from Telstra, but they had Optus and Telstra executives up on stage to put their hands on like a glowing wall and launch their 5G partnership. It was some wild stuff.
You don't usually see Optus and Telstra on the same stage, no.
I know. It was such a weird thing to just happen. It all happened so fast. But basically, Optus and Telstra are both partners in Oppo's, I believe they called it the 5G landing program, which is just all about actually bringing 5G to their customers as soon as possible. They say they're working with a bunch of global carriers to try and achieve this goal. And so as a result, their first 5G phone, they've said, will be on both Optus and Telstra's 5G networks.
And it's the first 5G phone that we know of coming to Optus.
To
Telstra's
Optus,
kind of,
yes.
Grabbed a bit of an exclusive on almost anything else which has 5G at the end of its name. Now, Oppo obviously were playing the concept game with their 10 times optical zoom. And I know you've also been running around Mobile World Congress looking or trying to look at some of the weirder and wilder concept devices that are out there.
Yeah, if I had to describe my overarching theme of Mobile World Congress so far, it is probably look but don't touch. The Samsung Galaxy Fold is here. They'll let people look at it, but no one's allowed to touch it. It's behind glass. The Huawei Mate X is here, but it's behind glass. No one's allowed to touch it. I'm keep trying to go and see the Nubia Alpha, which is this unique smartwatch that was announced at IFA last year, and I've been trying to get my hands on it at a trade show for ages. That's essentially a smartwatch form factor with a big rectangular phone screen that wraps around your arm like a wristband. And it looks so bizarre and sci-fi, but hopefully I should be able to actually go see that on the show floor today and see what that's about. The other really weird and interesting thing that I managed to find was that Energizer launched an enormous amount of phones at Mobile Congress, which I didn't actually know Energizer made phones now. But one of the weird things that they had was they also had their own foldable, sort of in air quotes, where they showed basically a model with a sticker of a screen on it that's like, oh no, we're also doing a foldable phone. Here's what the specs will be. It's real, we promise. It's very strange. And it's just covered in weird Energizer branding. And the specs on it aren't even they're not even forgettable. They're promising a 48 megapixel dual lens camera. They're promising a 10,000 milliamp battery. It's super interesting to see them actually in the phone space.
So this is a phone that you probably couldn't take on the plane with you then with a battery that kind of size.
Look, I don't think they've thought that far.
But, you're probably right. I get the feeling, and I could be totally wrong here, that it's one of those deals a bit like Kodak or Polaroid, where the name is up for licensing and somebody has grabbed it and they're trying to generate a bit of interest, especially if they're coming on Mobile World Congress and saying, here's the shape of what we think our foldable will look like. It's not a huge vote of confidence that they're actually capable of producing this thing. Fergus, are you there? Fergus?
No. Sorry. Hi, it's Jason here.
It's Chris here. I can't see Fergus, though.
He
That
disappeared.
sounds suspiciously like Jason and Chris from Ausdroid.
Hi.
Good morning.
I suppose it would be morning where you are, and traditionally, in fact, this time last year, I believe I was sitting in the Android garden in the snow recording this podcast. For a quick weather update, is it in fact snowing on you?
It's actually lovely.
It's a beautiful morning. The sky is clear, the sun is out, the cigarette smoke is everywhere. It's a stereotypical morning in sunny Barcelona.
And you've had lots and lots of really quite interesting phones to play with, I imagine. It's kind of difficult to know where to start, but I suppose one of the big headline acts this year was Huawei. They didn't quite launch a phone, but didn't they?
Well, yes, they did. I mean, the lead up to the show was unusual for Huawei in that there were leaks, but perhaps not as many as we've seen for some of their other handsets. And I think the expectation was, following the last couple of years of Huawei at Mobile World, was that perhaps there may not actually be a handset announcement this year. And in the weeks leading up, we saw some sort of foldable suggestion with intelligent connectivity, which is the buzzword of the show. People started putting one and one together and coming up with 3, 4, and 6.5.
No one really nailed it, did they?
No,
we were really surprised.
No one really picked exactly what was coming until probably the night before, when advertising started being placed up around the city and Huawei basically let its own cat out of its own bag. And now we have the world's first, fastest, and simultaneously slowest 5G foldable handset, because it is the only one that currently exists.
Now, of course, they got ever so slightly beaten to the punch by Samsung with their Galaxy Fold, but there are some pretty key differences.
Yes, there
with the
are.
Mate X, aren't
There's so the Mate X features what they're calling a post, and a lot of the circuitry and componentry for the phone sits in the post. There's the triple camera, and there's a lock that also allows you to unfold the phone once you press it. And so what you end up with is a small screen on one side of the phone and a large screen on the other, owing because of the post layout there. And so you end up with a very, very tall, narrow phone, and you end up with a sort of more traditional, tall, narrow phone. You also end up with a lot of equipment walking past us in the garden here, so we're sorry about that. And then when you unfold it, you get about an 8-inch tablet that's almost square. It's thinner than an iPad Pro, and because it's got a Leica triple camera on it, it's the best camera you've ever seen on a tablet.
That'd have to be the best tablet by a pretty long margin as well. I find the tablet thing interesting because from what I've seen of it, and I know you've been up and close in it in a way that I haven't, it seems like Samsung's doing more with multitasking on their version of a foldable than Huawei is, because they're only doing
I haven't actually had my hands on a Samsung Galaxy Fold. I can't really speak to that, but I did actually get to touch the Mate X yesterday, and it was pretty impressive. I know they do have multi-window features on it, so when it's unfolded, you could well run it as two apps side by side. Not sure. Maybe they can do more.
The most telling thing at the moment on both handsets from Samsung and Huawei is that the software isn't finished. Both brands have been very careful to keep the handsets out of people's hands. On the booths here at MWC, they're all behind glass. It is very rare that they're brought out sort of enclosed rooms for people to have a closer look. But we are led to believe from both sides of this fence that the software is far from finished. So exactly what multitasking they'll be capable of, we really don't know at this point.
When I was in the session yesterday with the Huawei people, there were tech bloggers from the US asking, so will it do things like, can I move a window to the top left of the screen while simultaneously doing something in the bottom right? And can I do this? And the guy was just like, yeah, maybe. We don't know. We haven't finished the software yet. So I think it's pretty far from release. And I think I kind of feel like they might be waiting to see what people ask, to see what features they might need to put in software-wise. One thing that did strike me is that they didn't seem committed to offering an API for developers to take advantage of it, which I was a bit disappointed in. I would like to see them embrace that. And on one hand, they tell us that they want developers to lead innovation on 5G, but on the other hand, they're like, oh, we've got a foldable screen and we're not giving you an API to do things with it.
I guess the challenge there, though, is because there's so many things you could do with a foldable form factor, you've either got to build something that's almost Windows-esque where you can resize a lot, or you've got to build an API that says, right, your dimensions are only this, which is a very kind of Apple approach, if you will.
Huawei are looking for feedback as to exactly what the final product will look like, but I'm left with the distinct impression that it will probably be very similar to the multitasking that they already employ on their larger screen handsets and indeed on their tablet range as well, where you'll probably find it's a tablet experience by default, and if need be, you can split the screen in half so you can have, for example, your emails on one side and a document or a photo gallery or something on the right. I do seem to recall they discussed the option or the ability rather to drag things from one side of the screen to the other, like for example dropping a file to an email. But whether we're going to see the full large screen experience of something more like Chrome OS or Windows, I really doubt it. I mean, it doesn't seem to have been pitched in that direction yet. They may go this way in future products, but I think for the time being, the very strong feel from a number of people we've spoken to is that Samsung and Huawei basically engaged in a race to bring this product to market first without being in a position to even start mass production of these things yet. They don't know exactly what problems these phones will solve. And that seems very broadly to be a theme of this conference this year. The rush to produce 5G has produced the same sort of statements in that we now have carrier networks rolling out with 5G. But the carriers are saying they don't know how to market it because they don't know exactly what problem it's going to solve for the consumer. And the handset manufacturers have sort of got their hands up in the air saying, look, well, we've now rushed to put 5G in our phones. The carriers aren't giving us any direction as to how they see that this is any better than 4G. And equally, we don't really know. The best examples that the brand representatives have been giving here is that, Netflix 8K on the go, which, though interesting, doesn't really seem like, the killer feature for 5G.
Did you hear about the remote surgery?
I did not.
I'm not going to go much into it, but I thought it was interesting that this was offered as a thing that is possible with 5G, because I also distinctly recall it was offered as a thing that is possible over the NBN. And so, going back to what Chris was saying about there needing to be a bit of a use case for 5G, the handset developers and Google are very specifically saying, hey, it's up to developers to innovate and find something to do here. We're going to give you a big pipe with low latency, and it's on you to figure out what to do with it. If you want to do remote surgery, and I really hope they didn't do remote surgery over actual 5G, because there is no 5G network. Although we did actually hear a funny anecdote last night, because HTC has a femtocell to run a 5G network on their stand for their home hub, and there was apparently another cell at
Orange.
I think it was Orange, yes, and they conflicted with each other. So HTC's network took out Orange's network. This is actually what we're going to see for the future of 5G. We're going to have roaming mobile networks that take each other out at random.
So even when nobody's on the 5G network, they're crashing themselves. That's not encouraging for the future of 5G surgery, I guess.
Well, no. It made for a very poor demonstration experience. You understand the execs on Orange stand were trying to show off their 5G solution, and the only network they could see was HTC's, which they couldn't access. So it showed some teething issues that were probably quite funny for all involved, but it demonstrates the difficulties in trying to demonstrate this technology when it, certainly in this environment, just doesn't seem ready to go.
Getting back to the Mate 10 for a second, because the one thing we haven't addressed, of course, is that asking price, because that's one thing they do know, and it's not cheap, is it?
No. The consensus is that a second mortgage is an option for the outright price.
I already have a second mortgage. Do I need a third?
It may be a third. I think the raw conversion of the euro price worked out to be about $3,700. And this isn't even a landed price. Like, the hardware's not finalised yet. The software experience isn't complete. The reality is we could be seeing a $4,000 phone by the time it hits Australia. And that asking price...
Especially once you factor tax in, I guess, yeah.
Exactly. You add tax and the Australia tax as well. Potentially this is a phone that very few people are going to buy. And I think Huawei are almost expecting that to be the case, and Samsung to a lesser extent as well. While they're both speaking of these products in terms of commercial availability, they intend to sell them to consumers. I think they both
just not that many of them.
I think they would concede that there simply won't be that many consumers buying these first generation products. The price is too high. And they both acknowledge this in interviews variously over the last couple of days, that the price is high and it will present a barrier to entry, but as they refine the manufacturing processes and bring down the cost, within a year or two we could see foldable phones that are at the level of affordability as the current top level smartphones, in that $1,000 to $2,000 price range.
And I mean, one way to get around that affordability problem, I guess, although we don't know for sure, is of course to make a foldable which isn't quite a foldable, which is sort of what LG has done.
Yeah, LG has sort of they've pitched their dual screen option as a realistic alternative to a folding phone, which, let's be fair, it is. If you just want to open up your phone, put an app on one screen, put the keyboard on the other, and use it sort of like a Nintendo DS, you can do it. So we are talking about the V50 ThinQ, which is going to be LG's first 5G phone. It's going to end up on the Telstra network, and we don't really have a pricing for the phone yet. Like, it's going to be a Telstra phone. It's probably going to end up on the plan, but that extra screen is going to set you back $400.
Yeah, 400, 3,700. There's a bit of a gap there, though.
There is quite a difference, and I suppose the appeal of the LG phone, and I say that cautiously because LG phone and appeal are not words that have traditionally been heard together for some time in Australia, but I think the appeal here is that you can just have a 5G slab handset in the format that everyone is familiar with now. But for those that desire an extra bit of screen real estate, that pricing option will be available to them to take advantage.
Yeah, they're basically saying that you could use the extra screen to provide work-related features for you for the week, and then take it out of the screen housing and use it as a normal phone on the weekend.
They also went in a different direction again, though, with the LG G8 ThinQ as well, given it's got some rather kind of unique scanning features.
Yeah, so we've seen time of flight in the Oppo R17 Pro, and it's a little bit, I'm going to be a little bit unkind, it's a little bit half-baked there. They've stuck the sensor on the back of the phone, shipped it, and they didn't really know what to do with it. I think in this case, LG's come up with possibly a better use for the sensor. It's facing the user. It doesn't have to see off into the distance. And so the features and functionality that it can bring are a little bit more finely honed. So you can wave your hand over the phone if it's sitting on the desk, and you can unlock it with that. It can also perform vein pattern recognition, which sounds icky, but it can recognize your hand as opposed to someone else's, and you can also use that to do facial recognition. It's a similar thing, I think, to what Intel's been doing in their RealSense cameras with vein pattern recognition, but technically it makes the face unlock on the G8 better than anything else.
It does feel very kind of sci-fi future concept stuff, and it's an interesting thing in and of itself, because otherwise the G8 looks to me from a distance to be very much, oh yes, it's another LG phone. They're not bad phones, but in that premium space, I do think, and you alluded to this earlier, they've kind of struggled to stand out a bit, haven't they?
They have. I mean, I think LG have struggled in the last couple of years for that reason. They've made phones that are technically very good. You know, there have been very few problems with them more recently, but they felt very bland. They're your plain white toast in a breakfast serve that has, croissants, pastries, and champagne, perhaps.
I think related, we haven't had breakfast yet.
Correct. But I suppose where I'm going with this, there have been some changes in the Australian smartphone market very recently. You've had a smartphone manufacturer that has had a carrier deal in the form of Sony with their pair up with Telstra that have exited the Australian market almost completely. We understand from unnamed sources that there may be as little as 2 Sony mobile staff remaining in the country to provide technical support to the existing customer base of 3. But with Sony making an exit from the market now, it seems that the opportunity is right for LG to step up their approach a bit. And the fact that they've got their phones on at least in the case of the V50, an exclusive carrier deal with Telstra, suggests that they're going to make a real punch to get back into the hearts and minds of the Australian smartphone user. And from a hardware perspective, they've made 2 phones that perhaps on the bland side of appealing, but the advantage that they may have is that they may be quite a bit more affordable than some of the other, especially the 5G handsets that we've seen. So there's a big opportunity here for LG, and they've made 2 phones that certainly, as we handed them around our team, everyone was impressed. There was not really a bad word to say about them.
Yeah, the thing I think is important to note price-wise with the G8 is that it's got this fancy-dancy time-of-flight sensor on the front, but it actually doesn't have anything additional in the price tag. So if you choose not to use the wild and crazy gestures, you're good. You haven't paid any extra for it. But if you do choose to use them, then great, you'll get some additional functionality of your phone that no one else can do.
Now, you mentioned Sony just then and their seeming absence in the Australian market, or seemingly coming absence in the Australian market, which seems like a bit of a pity because their Xperia 1 looks like a really interesting handset. I don't know if interesting is the same thing as
Sony have been a bit of a mixed bag. They've been consistent in the last couple of years of announcing some very interesting products, some of which have actually materialised into things that you can buy, some of which don't seem to have so much. And it's surprising that they've released a bunch of phones that look quite interesting, and yet it is virtually assured that they will not come to Australia unless people import them from elsewhere.
And the flagship of that line is them playing in that cinema space where they've got a lot of experience. The Xperia One, they're calling it, and it's very tall and thin, and it's got a very, very good screen, I understand.
Yeah, it's a very tall and thin phone with a 21:9 cinematic aspect ratio. We saw this turn up in leaks a few weeks ago, which confused a few people because they forgot that Sony actually owns a movie studio. So of course they want to bring those movies to mobile in the original aspect ratio. The technology of the screen aside, they're also adding in a bunch of cinematic video editing. So Sony has a large number of divisions from which to draw experience, and so they're bringing in technology from their Cine Alta group in video editing. And so they're adding sort of moods and a bunch of presets into on-device video editing, which has always been a bit of a problem. They're also tying it into they're really pitching the phone at creators, and so you can use the phone as an external monitor feed for some of their other devices, and it's the kind of thing that really pushes the phone away from, hey, I'm going to the store and I want to buy a new cool phone, and much more into the tool set of someone who's actually creating content. And if that's a niche that Sony can carve out for themselves, because Lord knows they've been trying to find a niche for a long time, then good luck and more power to them.
Now, it's their first triple lens camera phone, but they've kind of been beaten. Everyone's been beaten this year in terms of the number of lenses you can stick on the back of a phone by HMD Global, haven't they?
They have. There's a lovely announcement going on in the background. I might just wait for them to finish. There we go. No.
As with most announcements in Barcelona, it will probably be broadcast in approximately 3 languages and will convey very little information, which is quite unlike the camera system on the Nokia 9. With 5 lenses, it will convey much information. Not exactly sold on why 5 lenses are now necessary in mobile photography, but if nothing else, it makes for the most distinctive rear end on a smartphone that I believe we've seen.
It's a beholder. I mean, it is an actual beholder, this thing. It's just got eyes everywhere.
It can see everything. The actual specifics of the camera array, I think, are quite interesting. They've got identical lenses, and they've got 2 color sensors and 3 black and white sensors. Now, I'm surprised on paper at the number of monochrome sensors, but the key thing that HMD Global will tell you is that those sensors pick up way more light than anything else. So they've got 2 sensors that are seeing things in the RGB spectrum, and then they've got 3 sensors that are supplying light for it. And some of the sample photos that they've shown for this are just absolutely stunning. It can handle some amazing monochrome photography on its own without post-processing, but it can also capture so much detail and so much light in its photos. We are really excited to take it out for a spin.
We have seen this technology sort of in its infancy, I suppose, in other handsets. I do remember Huawei were playing in this space with pairing a color and a monochrome sensor together, and the depth that a monochrome sensor capturing light and shape information, the depth that adds to a color photograph, even with just 2 sensors, is quite interesting. So to see how Nokia do this with 5 combined together, especially when you consider that these 3 lenses are slightly offset. So if you've got a subject that is up quite close, this may allow, I'm only assuming here based on the optics of it, to capture some incredible detail for your close-up and your portrait style photographs that may, you can add this detail in post-editing using Photoshop and a lot of wizardry, but it may well be that the software on the Nokia 9 allows that level of detail to be produced on phone, which, as Jason says, we look forward to seeing what it can do, because on paper it sounds incredible.
Yeah, I'm really keen to see how they've done that implementation. You mentioned Huawei, and I loved their phones that had monochrome for shootings in straight black and white. It's not entirely clear how many of those individual lenses you'll be able to address and how you'll deal with things like wide angle or telephoto beyond the fairly obvious capture a massive image and crop the heck out of it.
I think that's actually the approach. They are they're identical sensors, and I think all the lenses are identical f-stops.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see. And it's also, whilst again, we don't have absolute Australian pricing, the US pricing suggests it's going to be really quite affordable for a flagship.
That's right, yeah.
This is in keeping with HMD, Nokia's ethos in smartphone pricing. They want to, I suppose, their main competitor in this space, you would have to assume would be something of your Motorola's, your Oppos, not necessarily that ultra expensive top end, but they want to give people a fantastic phone at a price that the people can actually afford. And with the Nokia 9, they are maintaining that same trajectory, making a top-level smartphone that doesn't carry that, $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 price.
Yeah, it should land in Australia somewhere around the $1,000 mark if their list price and holds true and the Australian dollar doesn't crash too much in the meantime. Finally, I guess, also, MWC is where you see a lot of concepts, and we've talked a little bit about how 5G still feels like a concept. And Jason, I know you've been looking at some of the weirder foldable concepts out there, including one which...
Oh, you saw that post.
Honestly has me utterly intrigued, and there's part of me that wants you to go and try and steal this thing just so I can wear it the once. The foldable OLED top hat, because it's the most insane, stupid, brilliant, wonderful, weird, dumb thing I think I've ever seen.
I hate to break it to you, it's just a top hat with a screen on it. But it is a flexible screen.
Christmas is ruined, everyone.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Christmas is ruined.
So Royale is the company that beat everyone to the punch last year with flexible displays. They released their phone called the FlexPay, and everyone got their hands on it at CES, and I think roundly hated it. It's said to be pretty bad with technology around the hinge, and all the software that runs the phone is just not ready and not finished. However, they've clearly invested a lot of money in making flexible display technology, and now they are whacking them on anything they can. They have a handbag that has a flexible display embedded within it. They've got a flexible display mounted on a t-shirt and a top hat, and they also have the FlexPay. But wisely, it's locked away.
Look, you'll just have to, distract them with the look over there and then run away with the top hat for me.
One might suspect that the security around the top hat may not be that great simply because of how ridiculous the product is. They may in fact be hoping that someone relieves them of the top hat before the end of the show.
I suspect if you walk out with a top hat with a flexible display on it, they will be able to see you a mile away.
But you see, if you're running, they'll simply just go, look, I can't possibly be seeing a man running with a flexible OLED top hat on. That can't be happening, and they'll look the other way. What could go wrong?
If we're still talking about flexible displays, I think we should probably not discount TCL. TCL's been putting a lot of money into developing flexible displays. They have a manufacturing subsidiary / sister company called CSOT, and they are demonstrating on the TCL stand. They've got devices that are folding and unfolding and displaying things across their screens. They've got concepts, and they're not willing to be first, so they're not going to go out and be the Samsungs and the Huaweis. But what they're going to do is they're going to wait about a year or so, figure out what form factor the market wants, figure out how to bring it in at a cheaper price, and then bring out a foldable phone.
Absolutely. I caught up yesterday morning with Sam Skontos, who's their local managing director, and he was somewhat bemused to see the first generation foldable products from the other manufacturers, and we shared a few laughs about some of his observations. But what he has shown us in the form of the CSOT displays and even some of their handset concepts, which they're not ready to go now, but it shows sort of the direction in which they're thinking. He was quite confident, as Sam usually is, that within 12 to 18 months, we could see a TCL branded foldable phone, perhaps with 5G, perhaps not, but at the very least foldable, on sale in Australia, aimed at the prepaid market, with an outright price that end of the market can actually afford. As we know, it's an area where Sam and TCL more broadly are very focused in their efforts in Australia. It makes up a significant part of their business, if not probably the entirety. And he was very, very confident that we would see foldable phones, not just for those capable of taking out a second or third mortgage, but also for the rest of us who may be looking for a phone under that $1,000 mark. He seemed to think that would be achievable from TCL within the next 12 to 18 months.
And for those folks also who want possibly the best macho product, ridiculous product name I think I've ever heard, because their marketing name for this is Dragon Hinge. And who wouldn't want a Dragon Hinge?
Oh, but everyone's got ridiculous hinge names. Hey, Huawei has the Falcon hinge. I think it's like Pokemon. You can see which hinge is going to rule them all. Actually, that's more Lord of the Rings.
And the satellite's cut out on me again, which I guess means I should wrap up another episode of Vertical Hold. Now, as always, we'd love to get your feedback. Are you keen on 5G? Are you excited by foldable phones, or do you think they're a ridiculous gimmick? Let us know via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page. Thanks to Fergus, to Chris, to Jason for joining me, and thanks to you for listening. As Adam always says, we're on a big push this year to reach more people, so it really helps if you tell your friends about us and if you jump on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from and leave us a review to help spread the word.
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.